This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Kathril Aspect Warper EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Up and Up series. Today we are updating and upgrading Kathril Aspect Warper. In the description of this video, you can find a deck tech for Kathril. You can also find the most up-to-date deck list for Kathril as well, in addition to this build's video primer series. So we've got some cards going in, that means we've got some cards coming out. So let's talk about our very first card in one moment. We are doing this particular installment of the Up and Up series with Kathril for one reason, and that reason is maximizing card advantage. We are trying to take a more active approach in this build to get better cards into our hand, to get more cards into our hand, so that we have more options of what we can do throughout the game. We are lacking in that department, but we won't be at the conclusion of this video. So, keeping in mind that we are looking to focus on card advantage in this video, our first card going in, it is Incarnation Technique. Here we have a sorcery for 4 and 1 black mana with the Demonstrate mechanic. That means that when we cast this spell, we may copy it, and if we do, we choose an opponent to also copy it. So keep that in mind as we move forward with this card. We mill 5 cards, and then we return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Helping out our opponents is not something that MTG Burgeoning likes to do. We don't stroll down that avenue. We don't go driving around on Sunday morning to let's help our opponents park. We're not part of doing that. However, with this card, if we were to just invest 5 mana, and if we are playing at a table where there might be a player that isn't playing graveyard shenanigans and isn't playing a creature-heavy deck, we may want to say, let's copy this and mill 10 cards and then put 2 creature cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield. We have many creatures in this build, and they're all there for Kathril, because that's what Kathril does, but in the early portions of the game, having some creatures out there may do us some good. And with 5 mana and helping out one of our opponents, we can do it twice with this card. It is enough to think about, particularly because of the number of monsters that we have in this build and all of their keyword-laden abilities. So, with the idea of maximizing card advantage, Incarnation Technique is going into the 99, and it is going to replace Eater of Virtue. Now, I will preface this by offering this disclaimer. Eater of Virtue was erroneously, let me say this a different way. It was a mistake to include Eater of Virtue at the onset of building this deck. And I say that because I misinterpreted the interaction and synergy of what this card could do if Kathril were equipped by it. I was under the false understanding that all of those keyword abilities could just be put onto Eater of Virtue if we were to return Kathril to the command zone upon its being exiled. Well, the Kathril would have to remain exiled in order for those keyword counters to stay on Eater of Virtue. And it is a feat as rare as winter roses it is a feat that is as rare as winter roses, returning a creature from exile. So with that in mind, and although this could pair well with some of the creatures, I should be able to say that in a different way, this could pair very well with the creatures that we have in the 99 of this build, we're not looking to exile those creatures, we're looking to get them into the graveyard for Kathril. So for an equipment like Eater of Virtue to not assist with any of our keyword ability displacement, well, then it has to go. And I think including Incarnation Technique over this artifact is going to help out the Kathril build so much more. All right, next card going in, it is Grizzly Salvage. Here we have an instant for black and green. That's Golgari colors. We reveal the top 5 cards of our library. We put a creature or land from among them into our hand and put the rest into our graveyard. Here we're most likely always choosing to get a land into our hand so that we don't miss our land drops to keep Kathril happy. We want those creatures in the graveyard so that we can cast Kathril and get those counters on it. So with Grizzly Salvage going in, it's going to replace Grapple with the Past. Now the mana value is the same, except it's not black-green, it's 1 and a green, and it is at instant speed. And here we put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard, and then we may return a creature or land from our graveyard to our hand. With Grizzly Salvage, we're doing it differently. We're getting 5 cards into our graveyard, and we still have the option of getting that land or creature into our hand. Same mana value, color's a little bit different, but Grizzly Salvage is better than Grapple with the Past. All right, next card up, we have, this needs to be talked about with reasons to put into a deck. I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about how awesome Sylvan Library is. I mean, if there were enough copies, I'd put it in every single deck with green. I'd put it in decks that doesn't have green. That's just how good of a card Sylvan Library is. Getting copies of it, well, that's a different story. So a copy became available, and I thought, you know what? This will be a great way to get Kathril and make it better. So this enchantment for 1 and a green mana, at the beginning of our draw step, we may draw 2 additional cards. If we do, we choose 2 cards in our hand draw this turn. For each of those cards, we pay 4 life or put that card on top of our library. With lifelink creatures running around here like nobody's business, in addition to what Kathril can do with all of those keywords, which include lifelink, paying 8 life and drawing those 2 extra cards, not to mention the way in which it can help manipulate the top of our library, well, Sylvan Library is going to do a great job in this Kathril deck, specifically because of all the extra life we're going to have in order to buy those extra cards and get them into our hand. Sylvan Library is going in. Now, before I flip it, I got to take a moment to just explain the reasoning behind it. All right, so we're not an army here. We are trying to win Voltron-esque. We are trying to win our games with commander damage. We have a commander that can get all of the keyword abilities onto it and send it into combat and knock out opponent after opponent after opponent. We're not creating dozens of creatures and then pointing them at one opponent, casting this spell, and then winning the game. We don't need this spell in this deck, and that's why it's going to yield to Sylvan Library. And it's not going to be easy to show it to you, so just remember, card advantage, and this spell is not as important to this Kathril build as it is to other builds. So Sylvan Library is going to replace Chroma's Will. You know what a Chroma's Will can do? It is my all-time favorite card from Commander Legends. 3 and a white at instant speed. We get to pick any of those abilities. If we have our commander in play, we get to choose all of those abilities. But again, all of those abilities are already on Kathril, minus the protection from colors, which, with everything that Kathril has evasion-wise, shouldn't be a problem. Chroma's Will is a fantastic card, but it'll do a much better job in a deck that raises an army for victory, as opposed to the Voltron-esque commander damage that we are seeking. So those are 3 spells going in and 3 spells going out, hopefully helping to make our card advantage better. That was the goal. That's going to be the goal with the last 3 cards. It's going to be land for land. 1 land is going in that's going to help with card advantage, replacing a land that hasn't been functioning as well as you might think. And the first swap is we're going to have Bonder's Enclave go in to replace Gavany Township. So Bonder's Enclave is going to allow us to pay 3 mana to draw a card, but only if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, which Kathril will almost always be. Gavany Township, we have to pay 2 in Selesnya colors to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Well, again, similar to what we said about our Chroma's Will, we're not raising an army, we're just raising a king. So we don't need to invest 4 mana and tapping a land to put a +1/+1 counter on Kathril. We'd rather pay the 3 mana and draw the card instead. So Bonder's Enclave is in, Gavany Township is out. Next swap, we have the War Room going in and Crawling Barrens coming out. War Room lets us pay 3 life, because we're going to pay life equal to the number of colors in our commander's color identity, which is 3, to draw a card. 3 life is a little pricey, but again, like we said with Sylvan Library and all of the life linking we got going on here, we won't be hurting for life. Crawling Barrens, we had a mana sink here of paying 4 mana to put 2+1/+1 counters on it, which we can do throughout the game, building it up, and maybe sending it into combat. Let's face it, the War Room's going to do more for us than Crawling Barrens will when it comes to getting other cards into our hand. All right, and the last... Oh, Kathril, where are you going? And the last swap here is going to be Arch of Araska versus Nesting Grounds. We will have the Ascend mechanic. It's almost a guarantee in Commander. And once we do, we pay 5 mana, and then we draw a card, and we can only activate it if we have the City's Blessing. That's what Ascend is, and we will have it. This is going to replace Nesting Grounds, which we could pay 1 and move a counter from target permanent we control onto another target permanent, but it's only at sorcery speed, which kind of really nerfs what that card could do in a Kathril deck. So Nesting Grounds is going to yield to the Arch, so that we can draw some cards. This is MTG Burgeoning, folks. Let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below.